Hello, and welcome to Anime Audio Commentary. Today I'll be commenting on episode 11 of Dungeon Meshi. If you'd like to watch along, then start watching now. So last we left off, Laius and the gang had found the dragon, and unfortunately it wasn't sleeping as they had initially assumed. But nevertheless, they were still planning to take it on. You know, initially it didn't seem like things were very good. You know, them having to fight an awakened dragon and all. You know, at least if they were sleeping they could have ambushed it, but... You know, they do have a plan, but it's a risky one. I mean, it seems like part of the plan is that they lure the dragon under a building and then collapse the building on top of it, thereby immobilizing it. I mean, that's probably about as sound a plan as you're gonna get. Although, in their boots, I wouldn't be so sanguine as Marcel seems to be. You know, I have to say, I'm very excited for this whole thing, in no small part because the idea that they're fighting the dragon so comparatively early in the season, you know, that opens up all sorts of possibilities. I mean, what happens if they succeed, really? We were given to understand that that was sort of like the end game, but... I mean, maybe they don't succeed, maybe the dragon escapes, or maybe they're forced to retreat. Who knows? I guess it is interesting that this dragon is a quadruped. I mean, I guess all dragons are sort of quadrupeds, but I guess what I'm getting at is that it doesn't have wings, which I suppose if it's entirely subterranean it wouldn't need them. I guess that's interesting because that sort of eliminates one dimension of combat. You know, a flying dragon is much more dangerous than a dragon that can only run around. Now that is interesting, that its tongue sort of acts as like the igniter, or the flint striker, as it were. You know, despite being a terrible, horrific monster, things seem to be working out. I mean, between the wardings Marcel has cast and, Ooh. Oh, Laius. Oh dear. I was going to say it's a good thing the pot protected them, but it only did so much. That seems like a bit of a drawback not to have realized that you might burn your fingers on the pot. Yeah. I guess it's unfortunate that some of these fine details escaped them, otherwise they might be better off than they had been before. Okay, so the dragon's gonna breathe on him again. I was wondering why it didn't do so immediately. You know, that would be a good avenue of attack for it. Much easier to scorch your prey than to get up close where they might be able to fight back. So, unfortunately, it seems like that old maxim is true, you know, no plan survives contact with the enemy. But at least Marcel seems to be on top of her A-game here. She's able to just drop a building on it. No, Okay, so she was on top of... I guess that makes sense she'd be up there, and she probably has some sort of enchantment to protect her, Featherfall, as it were. But what I'm wondering is, would a building collapsing on the dragon kill it outright? You know... I mean, even if it doesn't, surely it has to be grievously wounded, right? So, I mean, that's gotta be a whole bunch of stone masonry and stuff, like, landing right on your head. Like, that's gotta hurt, you know? I guess it's unfortunate that the dragon doesn't seem to be too put out by having a building dropped on its head. Man. That's really not good. And I guess, when your only option is to sort of play dead, that's a really dire strait you find yourself in. Oh dear. Man, that little, what would you call it, an amoeba, I think it was, he's causing trouble. Yeah, I mean, this is real bad if the dragon's sort of, aware of them no longer being dead. Man. Wow. Chillchuck is dropping some real gamer words there. Man. You know, that's something I always appreciate in, fantasy fiction. Slurs in different languages. You know, it's always interesting and kind of telling what sort of words they use. But for a minute, I was going to say that perhaps they're relatively safe underneath the dragon. You know, it likely can't breathe fire on them that way, but, wow, that is very unfortunate for Senshi's axe just to smash and shatter like that. I mean, that really indicates that, Dragon Scale is really tough. So I'm wondering, okay, so it is mithril. Although I think, they describe the cooking pot as adamantine, but the knife is mithril, both of which are sort of fantasy metals. I mean, I think Lord of the Rings, that invented mithril, and the idea is that it's, sort of like a magical metal. Okay, so I guess, the knife works, but, only to a degree. It can penetrate the dragon's scales, but it can't do any real harm because it's such a small blade. Man, it really does seem like an insane run of bad luck. I mean, at least Marcel, she has the right idea by staying out of the thick of things, otherwise she'd probably get pasted. I mean, what's a wizard gonna do in combat with the dragon, really, if they're right up close? And I'm also wondering, like, what does Laius think his sword's gonna do? I mean, I guess if you can strike the weak spot with the sword, that would be one thing, but, alright, you know what? I like the idea of that, since she's got the right idea here. You know, all the monsters we've eaten have resisted as though their lives depended on it. So, I guess the idea here is that we must do the same, but by the same token, we can't expect the dragon to behave any differently. And you know what, since she might be tough and rugged, but I imagine being stepped on by a dragon like that, that's really gotta hurt. I mean, if you're hacking up blood like that, that's gotta be like broken ribs or something. I think it's safe to say that's highly unenviable fate. Ooh. Speaking of unenviable, I mean, taking a knife to the eye. Ouch. I mean, good on Chilchek to have struck it right in the vital area. But, man, things are getting exciting. Like, it's all on Laius now, right? Like, Senshi's basically out of commission, as is Chilchuk now. But what's Laius gonna do? Because that inverse scale they mentioned, like, that's sort of like around the collarbone area. You know, I don't know how he's gonna get a good shot on it. Yeah, this is a really dire situation with only Laius and Marcel capable of doing anything. Alright, so clearly Laius has an idea of what to do, but, ooh, interesting. So he seems to want Marcel to launch him in the pot. And I guess, maybe that's the best they've got at this point. I mean, they can sort of take advantage of the fact that the dragon is now half blind. Yeah. Well, at least Marcel's asking the sensible question here, like, how are you actually gonna stab it? But, Laius mentions he has an idea, but tellingly he doesn't explain, which seems to me... This indicates to me that he's gonna try and, like, get swallowed whole so he can stab it from within. Which, that's a real risky strategy. You know, suppose the dragon decides to chew its food. You know, that's it for you. 'Cause, I mean, like, those teeth it's got, those are, pretty darn gigantic. I mean, suppose one of that punctures your torso, like, that's it for you. Your organs are gone. And I mean, Laius isn't faring much better as things are, getting slammed into a building like that. Like, even if you're covered in armor, that's still gotta hurt, you know? Like, what is it, Newton's first law? That still applies. Or maybe it's the third law. Oh, surely he didn't. Ooh. You know what? I have to admire that. To sacrifice his leg for a shot on the dragon. I mean, I guess, magic can heal him, which, I suppose that goes some way towards making it easier, but suffering a horrible limb mangling. Well, mangling isn't a strong enough word. I mean, it's just been ripped straight off at the knee. And then he landed on his neck. That's, or I guess upper back. I mean, that's, still not great. You know, your spine won't thank you for that. But it seems as though he was successful, ultimately. Wow. So I guess, where do things go from here? You know, they killed the dragon. I guess they just have to, find Falin now. I mean, surely there's got to be some other complication, right? The story can't be over. I mean, I guess obviously, Laius is having, like, his life flash before his eyes. I mean, we've seen a couple instances where there were pivotal moments in Falin's life. Presumably, this is how she got her knack for, dispelling ghosts or something. Woo. Now that's a rude awakening, to suddenly be confronted by a ghost like that. And then to be possessed. I mean, surely that's what this guy's doing. You know, I think it's interesting that even back then, Laius was, to a degree, heroic and self-sacrificing, trying to get Fallen to save herself. And I guess to her credit, she's unwilling to let that happen. To sort of, leave her brother to save herself. You know, maybe whacking him on the head isn't the best approach, I suppose, but, if it's that or possession... Well, she seems to have taken, like, a better approach, even, you know? Like, not merely exorcising the ghost, but, like, this is the root of the problem. You know, we need to solve that, and then the ghost will go. You know, it's interesting that people sort of act like what she did was wrong, but, you know, exorcising a wicked spirit, that is far from nothing. I mean, Laius is making it pretty clear, you know, you could be a priest or a traveling exorcist, you know. There are many callings that are inferior to that of a cleric. So, you know, maybe this was it. Maybe this was the start of their adventuring. Or rather, maybe they don't start going on adventures here, but this was, the planting of that seed. So I'm wondering, is this like a near-death experience here? Like, Fallen saying like, hey, don't worry about me anymore. It's kind of a weird thing to think after he's just gone to the trouble of slaying a dragon. Ooh, okay. So she has to go look for the leg. Yeah, I mean, maybe magic could reattach it, I suppose, but, man. I guess there is the issue of having to find Chilchuk and Senshi, who are, you know, likely buried under rubble. Yeah, you know, asking, are you okay? Like, that's something alright. They're clearly not okay. I mean, Chilchuk took a nasty blow to the head, but he's probably, on the whole, as fine as anyone could be. But, yeah, I feel like, Senshi's the person we should really be worried about. Yeah, you know, the idea that you feel all the pain at once from recovery magic, that's rather unsettling if you've broken a bunch of ribs. And you know what, it's probably worse for Laius, like, to have your leg reattached. Ah, man. Like, it's, I don't know how to describe it. Like, it's gross and gory in, like, a weird clinical kind of way. You know, when I think of, like, blood and guts in anime, you know, I think of, like, oh, I don't know, like something like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Or, well, maybe that's not even a good example, but, you know, stuff like that. But, like, this is like a weird sort of clinical gore. Clinical's probably the best way to put it, because it's like, maybe it isn't quite realistic, but there's definitely a degree of realism, and they're not sort of reveling in the splattering of viscera. Oh, you know, I hadn't quite considered that they would have to sort of root through the contents of the dragon. Oh. Yeah, I feel like what I said about clinical gore, I feel like this is going to become like a dissection in biology. Yeah, you know, I remember dissecting a frog in biology, and it was It was definitely something I'd rather never do again. And this is almost sort of like the logical opposite of that, you know? Like a frog's like a little tiny critter, and it's very hard to like poke around and see all the stuff you're looking at, but with a dragon, you know, you carve out a chunk of flesh and you just sort of like dig your way through the abdominal wall. Man. And like that's another thing, like Lys is like, wow, this is hot work. Like it would be hot inside a living body. Or a recently deceased body, I should say. Ah. And, you know, hey, they found the stomach, good on them, but, you know, now they have to cut it open and root through it. Oh. Well, hold on. For the stomach to be empty isn't necessarily a bad sign, right? I mean, the stomach is only the first sort of, phase of digestion, you know? Like, you masticate stuff with your teeth to break it down mechanically. Your stomach breaks it down chemically with stomach acid. But then your intestines absorb the nutrients. So... oh, man. I mean, surely this can't be the end, right? I mean, it isn't the end, obviously, but I mean, the end of Fallen. Or perhaps do they have to, pursue even more arcane means if, the normal business doesn't work here? Now, this is probably, the most disgusting thing I've ever seen. You know, a mass of hair and bone that's indigestible. To have to look through that for remains. It's like an owl pellet, but, you know, the size of a person. And that's another thing. You have to look and hope you recognize a bone as being sufficiently human. So they found her staff. I mean, I guess that's proof, but... oh my god. Good lord. What a grisly final shot. Man, that's gonna stick with me for a while, especially given the contrast between that and this cheerful music. Alright, well that's it for this episode. If you've enjoyed it, then by all means, tune in for the next one. See you, Space Cowboy.